Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey. John, it is another awesome week of really some cool things going on. It's amazing how good you feel when you're sort of giving back to other people. And for me, at least, it's when I feel my best, is helping others. You know, we've got our Pay It Forward initiative going on where we're giving away a digital gift card to just a random winner each week. I've been doing some volunteer stuff. We're partnered up with the amazing organization Hire Heroes USA, which helps folks transition out of the military and into the civilian sector in terms of finding employment. And yeah, it's just, I wish I had done more of it when I was younger, but it's always, you have the time, but you don't have the money, or you have the money, you don't have the time, and or you just make excuses and life gets in the way. I don't know, but it's never too late to do more for the community.
That's awesome. And before we started recording, we were just talking about that with our guests, you know, just the communities and man, knowing people in and around your area, and networking and the power of networking and just the cool things that make each place unique. And man, from Colorado to Idaho, you know, all around, there's people out there that are just hungry to help others. And I think that's really what this community, you know, the Second Act is about. That's what Hire Heroes is about. And it's a community that's reaching out to bring those behind us back, you know, up and help them be more successful than we were during our time. So, man, it's incredibly powerful. But with that, I want to get straight to introducing our guest, because we usually try to keep our shows to an hour, and I think he is going to fill that hour with some good stuff. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to get right into introducing the guests for today. We want to welcome Tony Liles to the show. Tony's a distinguished 25-year veteran of the United States Army, where he held leadership positions in aviation organizations at operational and strategic levels and reached the rank of Command Sergeant Major before retiring in 2019. That's awesome, first of all. Recognized as Client of the Year by Hire Heroes USA for his exemplary military service and profound impact on the communities that we were just talking about, Tony has continued to serve in the public sector, including a notable tenure as the Primary Care Operations Director at Boise VA Medical Center, focusing on healthcare for veterans in rural areas. Tony is a certified Gallup Global Strengths Coach and PROSI Change Practitioner, where he utilizes his expertise to empower teams and individuals. Residing in Meridian, Idaho, just outside Boise, with his wife, Brittany, and their 3 children, Tony is deeply involved in community service through organizations like Mission 43, Challenged Athletes Foundation Idaho, and Hire Heroes USA, demonstrating his unwavering commitment to supporting veterans and challenged athletes in Idaho. Man, welcome to the show.
Quite the resume, Tony. There, Tony. Yeah, then welcome.
Yeah,
man, I ain't know who y'all were talking about. That's
well, I'm reading off your bio, Tony, and I find myself pumping my fist because I'm getting jazzed about all you're doing. That is quite a career. 25 years, man. And then what you're doing on the backside. Truly phenomenal. The way you're giving back. I mean, let's just recognize that right there. You gave 25 years to your country in uniform, and now since 2019, you've been giving back to your community and the veterans that are coming after you. So, man, what a way to lead right there. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I will tell you this, that Martin Luther King said everybody can be great because everybody can serve. And that's all you need. And
Yeah.
I know that contributing to the welfare of others is one of the best things that you can do in life. And that's what we do. We serve. And just because we take that uniform off, it doesn't mean that we stop serving, because that's ingrained in us.
Yep.
I mean, coming through the military, you are going to learn selfless service, and it's a great thing to have. And so it's something I have to do. I have to contribute to the welfare of others. And I tell a lot of my colleagues, it's a great feeling to go from serving your nation to serving your community. And so that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Getting involved. It's about that community. It's about your community.
Tony, usually I like to go all the way back to the beginning. And we like to hear kind of how you started out. But first of all, I want to go real quick to the 25 years in uniform and the rank of Command Sergeant Major, because I don't think everyone is familiar. Not all of our listeners are been in the military, but just tell people, Command Sergeant Major, what is that? Who are you representing? How hard is it to get picked up as a Command Sergeant Major? Give me a little insight for our audience.
Well, to get selected for a Command Sergeant Major, it is a 0.4% chance that any enlisted member that signs in the U.S. Army will make it.
Yeah.
0.4% chance. And you're part of it's a different type of leadership. You are mentoring young officers. You are leading young soldiers, and you are a sounding board for a commanding officer. That commander has an innate trust in you to advise them on the most important parts of the organization and where the organization is headed. You help develop the vision for the organization. You have to be the example of the values. Your audio and video has to match without a doubt.
Yeah.
And you're the eyes and ears for the commander. You are his sounding board or her sounding board. You're their battle buddy. You work with every leader in that organization, from the chaplain to the executive officer. And it's one of those, one moment you're where the rubber meets the road, and the next moment you're working on strategic decisions for the vision of that organization. And so it is a highly regarded position, but it's hard to really look at it in hindsight, because you got to be able to keep up and run at 6:30 in the morning with 18 to 21-year-olds.
Yep.
And then, you know what I mean? I was 38 years old. I had been in uniform longer than some of these people have been alive, and I still got to run up and down the road with them. You know what I mean? And show them you're the example of what right looks like.
Yeah.
You know, I used to always tell my soldiers, be better to me. You have that opportunity to be better to me. But, you know, at the end of the day, I would tell you what helped me be successful as a sergeant major was at the end of the day, I would ask myself, would Private Liles be proud of Command Sergeant Major Liles?
Nice.
Wow.
And if Private Liles is proud of him, then I did right that day. And because I realized that every soldier that you lead is somebody's daughter, somebody's son, somebody's grandchild, and you're leading America's sons and daughters, our country's most precious asset. It's not the GDP. It's not who's going to be the next president. It's our sons and daughters. You're leading America's sons and daughters. And so that was a responsibility that I never took lightly. So,
wow.
I love that, Tony. And I know through the course of my life, both professionally and personally, I've evolved my thinking to go from what do I want to accomplish to how do I want to be remembered. And that paradigm shift in thinking, I think, really helps one reflect on the actions that they're taking, both for themselves and for those around them, whether they have sort of personal power or positional power over those people,
yes.
or not. And there's always someone looking, right, and watching and trying to sort of understand the type of human you are. And I love, matching the audio and visual, because are you actually walking the talk is just awesome.
And I love that you talk about that, Michael, that personal power and positional power, they're both important. And that positional power, what that does for teams, you get compliant people. You know what I mean? But when you use that personal power in the right way, you go from getting compliant individuals to committed teammates. And that personal power requires a little bit of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yes.
And leaders have to be vulnerable at the right time. And so, yeah, I love that you bring up personal and positional power because they both exist. They both exist.
And Tony, I love that you bring up vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because, I was a Marine for 20 years. You're in the Army for 25. We don't talk about vulnerability. Or if we do, it's got a negative connotation on it.
Oh, yes. Yes, it does.
But you can tell from the day a new commander comes in or a new leader comes in, whatever that position is, and they get in front of the troops that they're leading, and they try to empathize, they try to show connectivity, they try to show integrity, but vulnerability is hard to communicate or to show unless it's in the right time, in the right environment. But sometimes, even in those situations, it's done poorly.
Yes.
And there's a fine line between vulnerability and being honest to strengthen those around you and being vulnerable and showing some weaknesses. How difficult is that to navigate when you've got 300, 500 troops looking at you?
It's hard because in the military, you have to get those service members to believe in the training, to believe in their leadership, to believe in their own abilities, to believe in their team. And that vulnerability, it comes out when you're with small numbers. I found best in the military. It wasn't until I was a command sergeant major when I started really sharing my background, my childhood. I hid it for almost 20 years that I am the son of a crack cocaine addict.
Wow.
Who was murdered in a drug deal gone bad when I was 16 years old. I hid that because I thought it mattered about how you came up. And that kind of goes back a little bit because a lot of people, I didn't become patriotic until about 5 years in the uniform.
Yeah.
I was running from something when I joined the Army. I was running from rural drug addiction, drug-infested environment with dead-end jobs, lack of opportunity, and I was running from abuse. But I was running towards an opportunity. And fortunately, I grew up around a couple of Vietnam veterans. Some of them was very successful, and some of them were not close to being successful. And I saw the military as a way to create opportunities for my future. I hid that for so long. For so long, I hid that. And once I became a command sergeant major and I got to know some of my other soldiers who were coming from situations similar to mine, I started to share my story. And I did it in a way that was like, man, I was like gambling. I felt like I was at Vegas. What are these soldiers going to think of me?
Yeah.
And it created relationships that I still have today. It created that connection. And later in life, I learned after reading a book by Brene Brown called Daring Greatly, that when you own your story, you get to write the ending.
Yeah.
So, that vulnerability, you have to be careful with it, especially in the military, because it is a rank structure.
Yeah.
And so, it's a challenge, John. It's actually a challenge.
Yeah.
And, it's nothing you can read in a book that teach you about when to be vulnerable or, leaders, man, it's hard.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, leading other humans is hard.
It's hard.
You gotta, you're not going to have always have the right answer, but sometimes you got to know as a leader when to ask the right question. You know what I mean? Or when to be vulnerable. So it's hard.
Man.
I mean, there's an element of situational awareness, and you're dealing with personalities, and I've thought about vulnerability, and I myself have become more vulnerable with things that I talk about over time. And I think the biggest fear people have is the fear of being judged, and you're sort of programmed at an early age to, get good grades and be super competitive, and you're getting judged really from birth at every stage of your life. And so you're not taught to be vulnerable and have these flaws that everybody has.
Yep.
And I think it sort of unlocks something really interesting when you can bring the human element to it and talk about, the road you've traveled, good, bad, and ugly, and how you've come out on a different side of life, and these are the cool things you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think in order to get there, and maybe you can agree or disagree, Tony or John, is that you need to have some layer of confidence building in what you're doing. And maybe the military is really great at building confidence in people for leadership positions. But until you get that, I think people will hold on to that fear of being judged and be less vulnerable.
I 100% agree with you on that, Michael. I 100% agree.
Yeah. It's really interesting that we have that fear to open up, and we think that our story's a one-off, but when we open up and we are vulnerable in the right place, right time, we recognize that there's other people out there that were not in a too far dissimilar situation, and how beneficial it is to share those stories and build that camaraderie and be able to put your arm around somebody else and say, man, I know what you went through because I went through a similar situation. And man, that right there, that builds team.
Yes, it does.
And that builds an organization that is going to be strong through a lot. So
absolutely,
we want to commend you, and I actually would love to, if you can, just give us a snapshot of where you were, raised, what that looked like outside of, what you went through with your dad. Just give us a kind of a background of what drew you into the Army.
All right, man. So I tell people I actually grew up on Tobacco Road in North Carolina.
Okay.
I mean, I learned how to prime tobacco at a young age. I grew up right in between Fort Bragg and Raleigh-Durham area.
Okay.
So I'm an avid Tar Heels fan.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Duke and Coach K. I will root for Duke anytime they're playing anyone other than North Carolina. Yeah, I grew up on Tobacco Road, a rural area, and not too far off the I-95 corridor out east. It's the halfway point between Miami and New York. So I saw a lot of things growing up, and I'll tell you, crack cocaine ravaged the area that I grew up in. There was a lot of self-medicating. There was a lot of Vietnam veterans that I knew that didn't get the help that they needed. But like I said earlier, I knew two. I had an uncle, and I had a close family friend who I called uncle. So I had my Uncle Tony, who was drafted into Vietnam, and he was an amazing. He made us. I watched him create opportunities through the military. He was drafted as a private, went from private to sergeant first class, and his leader saw something in him, and then he went from not only from private to sergeant first class, he went from lieutenant to colonel before he retired. And I had another uncle, Uncle Bo, who lived across the road, the dirt road from my grandmother. He was a retired first sergeant, and he had the coolest hat that I ever saw in my life. Above his wooden stove, it was his round brown, his drill sergeant hat.
Nice.
And he was very formidable in my life. I watched him give a bunch of drug addicts and alcoholics odd jobs around his property. And one day I asked Uncle Bo, I said, Uncle Bo, why are you always helping these guys out, giving them money to do stuff that I can do? He was like, because those boys are fighting battles you know nothing about. And later in life, I learned that they were Vietnam veterans that never got the help that they need. So that stuck with me throughout my whole military career. And so I joined the Army after dropping out of college in 1995 to earn money for college because, I didn't want to take out loans and my parents couldn't afford it. And I found out I was going into debt $13,000 a year to go to college, and I didn't want to do that. And so I joined the Army to get $30,000 for college. But once I got in the Army, I realized I was back on something I was missing. My whole life, I was always part of a team.
Yeah.
How most kids would be happy that it was the last day of school. I wasn't happy it was the last day of school.
Yeah.
That meant that I was going to eat once a day. That meant I was going to do a lot of manual labor each and every day. School was my refuge.
Yeah.
Sports was my paradise. That's where I felt like I belonged. Everything was even. I was on the same playing field as everyone else. It didn't matter that I'm going back home to a 2-bedroom trailer. When I was on that court or when I was on that field, I was just as good as everyone else. And I was accepted. I was appreciated. I was celebrated. And it was like my life, I tell you, guess who taught me how to cut and how to eat a steak? It was my basketball coach. I had my first steak in my life with my basketball coach.
Wow.
And he taught me how to cut a steak. He taught me how to eat a steak. He taught me about different cuts of steak, what to look for in a steak, why you don't want to overcook a steak. He taught me all of that. So that was really my life. So when I got into the military, I found a similar feeling that I had in athletics. I was, hey, PT hard, be in the right place at the right time, in the right uniform with the right attitude, ready to get busy. Oh, I can do that. Oh, show up 10 minutes prior. Dude, I'm broke as a joke. I ain't got nothing to do but show up. That's the only thing I can do without that will require money. And so I found the military life to be phenomenal. And so, you know, my first 2 years, I was raising my right hand to do it again. And, you know, it was right before I got ready to re-enlist. I went home for Thanksgiving back to North Carolina. I was stationed in Hawaii, and I had to go to school at Fort Rucker. And so they had Christmas Exodus while I was in school there, aviation life support equipment school. And I went home, and I had been in for about 2.5 years, and I was hanging out with my buddies. I was the only one that had good stories to tell. I had seen part of the world, and I had beer money.
You went somewhere.
I had beer money. And I was looking around. I was like, man, maybe this military life is not bad. I'm staying in. So 3 turned into 6, 6 turned into 10. And the next thing you know, I met my wife. If I fast forward, I met my wife here in Idaho when I got stationed here in 2005. And I fell in love with the Valley. Then I met her in 2007. And I met her in 2006, asked her to marry me in 2007. And I promised her, I said, if you marry me, I'll bring you back here. There's no other place I'd rather raise a family. But I've been in for 13 years. I'm only going to stay another 7 years, and then we'll be back. Well, I wound up staying for another 11 years because, you know, it was hard to leave that life. It was hard to walk away. There was some things that happened. I had some injuries that I sustained throughout my career. And then once I kind of realized that I could no longer be everything that I expected my soldiers to be, it was time to move on. I wasn't going to get out of the Army until 2027. I was going to stay the full 32 years, but I could no longer be that same leader that I felt America's sons and daughters deserve. So,
Wow.
It's an incredible story. And the things that you've shared up to this point, all the way back to your early childhood, you know, I think, at least for me, and I'm sure our listeners can sort of connect the dots on what has led you up to this point. And then as we mentioned in the intro bio, some of the service-based organizations you're working with now, which I'd like to get into in a second, but I just find it really enlightening, Tony, to hear your perspective on how important the school community was for you and wanting to stay in school. You know, like you said, most people, kids, they look forward to their summer vacations. But you don't think about other perspectives and other dimensions of life and how important that, in some ways, safety net is to someone. And then finding that again in the military. So these are really extensions of your family in some ways. And in some ways providing more support than your family could at that time.
Right.
And then your commitment to service for that, such a long and decorated career there, it's really powerful. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I tell people all the time, man, it's easy to serve for me because I look at the opportunities that this nation afforded me through my service. And this nation poured so much into me. I got to serve under some of the most phenomenal leaders this nation has to offer. to be where I'm at today, to get an education, to gain phenomenal experience. The military in this nation really, really poured so much into me that I got so much in my cup to give back to my community now from what I have experienced. You know, it's all about contributing to the welfare of others.
Yep.
And, you know, we talked about vulnerability, man. And I tell you, when I was going through those transition courses, all I heard was success stories about what life is going to be like out of the military. And man, I believed it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I attended every seminar, every course I could. I got out and it wasn't matching up.
Yeah.
It was not matching up. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, we all go through things for a reason.
Yeah.
And that's why I do so much with Hire Heroes USA today, because I want to tell veterans, hey, it's going to be hard. But guess what? You're not alone. It's going to be hard, but you're not by yourself. You got a community right here with you that's going to be right there, shoulder to shoulder with you. They're going to be there to pick you up when you fall. They're going to be there to keep you they're going to be behind you to push you when you need it. And I will never forget the day that the transition specialist for Hire Heroes USA looked at my resume. And after I had applied for about 50 jobs, told me, I'm going to tell you right, she was about 5'1", and I'm 6'2", 235 pounds of grade A beef. She's 5'1", 98 pounds soaking wet. And she's holding this piece of paper. And the room is full of people. We had just finished a class. Hire Heroes USA did a class. And people are in there. And she said, Sergeant Major, I'm going to tell you what your problem is. And I'm like, oh, shit. She said, you're too damn humble. I was like, what? And I just looked at her. She said, yep, look at this. You're too damn humble. This is why you're not getting any interviews. You're too damn humble. Man, she took my resume and flipped it, and I got 2 interviews the very next couple of weeks and 2 offer letters, and man, it was wild. It was wild.
Wow.
We've heard that struggle, Tony, from especially from the military community. I think you're sort of pounded into your head that it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you, and you're part of a team. And so when you, regardless of stage, when you leave the military, or if you're just somebody who has a natural inclination to being humble because of like family circumstances or whatever you've learned in life, talking about yourself and presenting yourself as sort of this big deal in some way is hard. It's really hard. And in this noisy world that we live in now with all the social media and digital tools and everything, and just the constant noise, you kind of have to like find your voice and present yourself in a way that speaks to your accomplishments, but maintain that level of humility that I think is important in that conversation.
Exactly. Because I truly believe I'm not important. I contribute to important things,
right?
But I'm not important, you know? So it's exactly what you're saying, Michael. Exactly. That humility, that selflessness, and it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
You know, it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, Michael and Tony, you know, that's what the military does to us, though, is from day one, we talk about unit and the strength of a unit. It's not the strength of an individual. And the military does a great job of never putting an emphasis on a single person. Even when you've got a commander of a squadron or a unit, they're not the focal point. It's the troops that are under them that is the focus. And so I think that's what's so hard about transitioning members, whether they go in for 4 years or 25 years, like Tony, is for that amount of time, we're so focused on the unit being strong and the unit driving towards a goal and the unit achieving success that all of a sudden we're at retirement or we're at our discharge and we find ourselves in transition class and we're trying to write a resume about what we did.
Yeah.
And it's completely counterintuitive to what we've been doing for the time that we've been in service. And so that's why I think Hire Heroes is so valuable.
Absolutely.
Because you have these transition specialists that know exactly what we've done. They know the importance of the mission. They know the strength of the unit, but they say, whoa. You are the one getting out. You are the one going to find service somewhere else or find a job. Let's focus on what you have achieved. And they put us, the service members, on our ear, and we kind of think, oh, shoot, I do need to think a little bit differently, because now I'm no longer in a unit that's looking out for my well-being. I'm looking out for myself. I need to market myself as such. And so super valuable input, and to just be reinforced by Tony's story, I think that's incredibly important to highlight.
Absolutely. And I just want to stress one more thing about the vulnerability. Even though it's hard for folks and maybe gets easier over time, the sooner you can have the confidence to be vulnerable, the more impact you're likely to have on at least one person's life. And there are extreme scenarios where if you have a story you're a little embarrassed or afraid to share, and you share it, and someone else hears it that is supposed to hear it in that moment, I mean, it could be literally the difference between life or death for that person.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
Tony, tell me about, the transition, which we just talked about, but you mentioned you had a couple job offers and you find yourself going to interviews. And I read off all the things, the incredible things that you're doing with the VA and helping veterans out and global strengths coach. Tell me about those first few interviews, and then navigating through the market as a newly transitioned service member.
Man, it was a very dark time in my life. I wasn't ready, like I said, to leave. I hadn't expected to be out of uniform in 2019. I thought I had another 13 years, another 12 years to go. But I found myself going into the interviews trying to really sell myself. And it was the most uncomfortable hours of my life that I had ever experienced. It was worse than any promotion board.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you, I did not like it.
You almost feel dirty, don't you?
Yeah, you felt like you've done something just wrong. You know what I mean? Really, you're trying to sell yourself to let that panel know that you're the best candidate. And I never saw myself as that. I always saw myself as someone that's willing to learn, that's going to give 110% effort, and that's never going to quit. I never, ever pictured myself as the best of anything. I mean, that's just who I am. And so I went through it. And then when I was getting like the no's, or you were not selected, or not even like a callback, it really affected me in a way that it beat me down. I was wishing that I was back in. I was starting to second guess my transition. I told myself I should have just been okay with not being able to be everything that I expected my soldiers to be. I should have just, been in the rear with the gear.
Yeah.
And, or stayed in Colorado, where it would have been easy, even though I had made this promise of where I wanted to raise my family, the life that I wanted to have for my family. I started to get cynical and thought I should just start thinking about what was best for Tony, because Tony needed to provide, and Tony needed to get a job. And, this area really wasn't working out. And so I started to apply for jobs that I felt were layups, and didn't even get, we talked about FedEx earlier, right? Always moving forward, that arrow. Man, I applied to be like a FedEx driver and didn't even get like a interview or nothing back. So it was really hard, but that's where Hire Heroes USA really came in and helped me realize what I had contributed to, what I have done. And that's when things started to turn around. I remember, it was a lot of sleepless nights. I wasted 90 days, could have been enjoying that time with my family on terminal leave, but I was sitting behind a computer, stressed out.
Yep.
And for 6-7 hours a day, I'd drop my kids off at school and sit behind a computer looking for jobs. I'd pick them up from school, feed them something, hang out for a little bit, and then go back upstairs and look for jobs.
Yeah.
I missed out on everything that I wanted to do with my children and my wife because I was so stressed about finding a job. And so I squandered my terminal leave away because I was thinking I had to do it on my own. And it wasn't until I found Hire Heroes USA that things started to really pivot and change.
Well, I want to highlight for the people listening, especially the service members out there.
Yeah.
You've got a 25-year command sergeant major in the Army, a 20-year pilot in the Marine Corps who can vouch to how hard it is to get out there and find a job on your own. They need to link up with Hire Heroes as soon as possible.
Yep.
Because that is the difference maker. Just somebody being in your corner to tell you how valuable you are to an organization out there, outside the military, and not waste 90 days, not waste your terminal leave, but use it wisely to feel free, feel like you're turning a corner and doing it with aggressiveness.
It's a great point. And I know Hire Heroes, they pride themselves on the one-on-one personalized coaching.
Yeah.
Our other guest who we had on who has gone through the Hire Heroes program could recall the person's name and spoke to a lot of the things you're talking to, Tony, about how they boosted their confidence and help reassure them as a client about the things that they've accomplished in life, both work-wise and on a personal level.
Yeah.
That then helped them navigate into what is now their career path where they find purpose and fulfillment.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. And I'll tell you, I was just on the phone yesterday with Zach Tibbetts, and I tell you, he is the area manager here in Idaho, and I tell you, he is my brother. We are so tight, and he cares so much that I feel like Zach's a former Marine, and I feel like Zach and I serve together. That's how tight we are.
Yes.
I know his family, he knows my family, and it's just an extension of that service. And I felt like Zach and I were in uniform together. That's how close we are. And that's what Hire Heroes is about. I just tell veterans every day, you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not alone once you take that uniform off.
So on that point, Tony, people today, especially in this 24/7 news cycle and a million things going on, I feel like in general, the patience level of people has gone down. And so how do you reassure folks to have patience, trust the process, and trust in Hire Heroes that things are going to sort of navigate the right way for them? Do you have any sort of advice around that?
Have the growth mindset. Have that growth mindset. Be that lifelong learner. One of the smartest men that ever walked the earth, Albert Einstein, once said, learning should commence at birth and only end at death. And so when we transition from the military, we got to remember that, I started out as a private. John, you started out as a lieutenant,
Yep.
And so when we come out, it's that, no pun intended, but it's that second act.
Okay.
Not saying you have to come out and be at the bottom of the barrel, but you have to come out with that growth mindset that you have things you have to learn. You have to have a starting point. Your starting point is going to be a little bit ahead of where most people coming into the workforce is. However, you're still at a starting point. And so, there are stories where people do land VP positions and executive positions, but those are very finite. But typically you have to have that growth mindset. I'm going to enter this next organization and I'm going to do the best at this role. And then they will see me, what I have to offer, and I will grow from there. If it's the right organization.
Yep.
It's all about, you have to interview the organizations the same way they interview you.
Absolutely.
Because you are coming from a profession where it was a values-based organization. And you best believe if you did not live those values, you were going to be held accountable. Things are a little different here in the civilian world when it comes to those values and things like that. And so you have to look at that same thing, that same alignment for you. I remember sitting in a transition course, and I remember a gentleman said, typically most veterans have 3 to 5 roles before they find the role that they're satisfied in, and they start to grow. And I sat back with my arms all crossed, thinking to myself, daydreaming, BS. If any organization takes Tony Liles, they're going to get me for 15 to 20 years. I'm going to be dedicated. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Nah, it's not. You have to make sure you're finding the right organization where you fit and have the growth mindset. Hey, if something doesn't work out, that's okay. You can move on, because our sense of commitment sometimes gets in our way. It got in my way. So yeah, you just have to have that growth mindset and understand that, you're going to have to tweak. You're going to have to make adjustments. You're going to have to make some changes to really find that right role. So that's one piece of advice I give veterans all the time is this is your opportunity. You got to look out for you in this world when it comes to that. And that's why I think community service is so important, because I was looking for something that I thought I could find that I had in the Army, and that doesn't exist outside the military. However,
say that one more time for everyone.
I was looking for something that I couldn't find, and it doesn't exist outside the military.
Yep.
You're not going to find that same sense of gratification, that same sense of teamwork. Not saying that it's wrong, but it's just different.
It's just different.
It's just different.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with organizations outside the military, but the military is truly special. And when you spend over 2 decades of your life in the military, you got to have a growth mindset. You got to be able to adjust. And I tell you, that's why serving others is one of the most selfish things you can do, because it's going to give you that same gratification
you
that
feel
you
amazing.
had in the military.
Yeah.
You feel amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's books that include chapters about commitment and community in the military. One of the best books I've read about teams is called The Culture Code. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of that, yeah.
It's absolutely outstanding book. And I think that's a great way to describe it. It's not better or worse, but different. So and to borrow the Marine Corps phrase, adapt and overcome. So you're adapting and overcoming the differences between, military and civilian life. And now you're doing a lot of service-based work and coaching. So, let's segue into some of those awesome things you have going on.
Oh man, I love coaching. Clifton Strengths is one of the most amazing growth assessments you can do. And I like Clifton Strengths because it's a paradigm shift in your thinking. You no longer look at, oh, this is what's wrong with me. Clifton Strengths changes it to this is what's right with you.
Yeah.
You don't need to change. It's all about these innate talents that you have that drive you. So let's blossom those.
Yep.
Into being the best that you can be. And then you start to view others as this is what's right with them. And I will give you an example. Like for me, I'm that guy in a meeting that asks a lot of questions. And so it may appear to some as I'm a stump the chump type of guy. No, I am a learner. That's one of the talents that I have, is a learner. And not only do I want to learn for myself, I want to learn things so well that I can help teach others, that I can dive deeper into it. So I do ask a lot of questions. And that's why I ask questions, because I want to learn to a level that I can help share that with others. That's what Clifton Strengths helps individuals see. That's what it helps teams to see. And it helps people, live their best days. They will tell you that, days that you're drained, days that you're irritable, it's because you're having to perform tasks that's outside of your strengths, outside of who you are.
Yeah.
But you can take it and you can flip it and use your talents to adapt and overcome,
Yep.
And so that is, I have a deep rooted belief system in me, because for me, I had people in my life outside of my parents that poured a lot into me. And so my grandparents poured a lot into me. So I have a deep belief system. So when I'm dealing with others, I have to be able to say, okay, I understand what they're saying. I accept what they're saying. I don't agree with it because it's against my beliefs. But however, I need to put those beliefs to the side because this is the task at hand.
Yeah.
And so it just helps me navigate the world into, not what's wrong with Michael or what's wrong with John. It's about what's right with Michael, what's right with John. And that's one thing about Clifton Strengths, and it's helping people grow. I'm a firm believer in the growth process and the growth mindset. And I think that, we have to stop getting through things in life and we have to start growing through things. Because when you get through something, yeah, you survived it. It wasn't the best, but you usually come out bitter. You look back on it, you got resentment in your heart. You know what I mean? But when you grow through things, you get stronger, you get better. And then you look back at that trial or that tribulation that you went through, and you start to have an appreciation for it because you came out on the other side a better person.
Yes.
And so that's why I believe so much in Clifton Strengths and coaching, individuals through those hard times.
There's nothing better than saying I did it rather than I thought about it, I tried it, I did it. The outcome, it matters a little bit, but not so much. The fact that you went through it, I think, is what matters more.
That's right, Michael, because we get so fixated on the destination that we forget that the growth happens along the journey.
Yes. Yep. Yes, absolutely.
Man, Tony, I think I'm looking at the time thinking, man, I wish we had more. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and your heart is truly amazing to want to help those around you. And I'm interested to hear real quick, if you can, about Mission 43. How you help challenge athletes there in your neck of the woods.
You, Mission 43 is a phenomenal organization. And I would tell you right now, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for Mission 43. They hate when I say that, but man, you got to give people the flowers while they can still smell them. And I tell you, Mission 43 helped me. They helped me discover who I am. After the military, they have a phenomenal leadership program. And I went through the first phase is Lead Yourself First. And I did not like that title. I did not like it at all. But I got to meet Mike Irwin. He's the founder of Team Red, White, and Blue, a phenomenal American. I tell you, his book, Lead Yourself First, is phenomenal. And so Mission 43 helped me find Tony Liles, not Command Sergeant Major Tony Liles, but Tony Liles. Today, if you want to work on your education, if you want to work on empowering your community, if you want to work on employment, they have all those facets in that organization. That's how I got ingrained in the community, in community service, was through Mission 43. Holding events for kids. We do something every year. We do the 9/11 Memorial Run. And I tell you, to see our community come together and put the donkeys and the elephants and the politics all to the side, the differences, all that social unrest to the side. We out there wearing the same shirt. It's 2,000 people running in the same direction, celebrating those who paid the ultimate sacrifice when our nation was attacked. That's the America that I love. And that's what Mission 43 helps do. They bring the veteran community together in order to serve the community. And that's how I found Challenge Athletes Foundation. They are housed right there with Mission 43. And to see individuals who have gone through or who are dealing with a disability to have the opportunity to participate in athletics, something that helped me through my childhood. I think sport is great for everyone, and to be able to help others have that opportunity to participate in sports, man, I tell you, that is a phenomenal organization to volunteer for. I take my 13-year-old son with me to Challenge Athletes Foundation events, and he volunteers with me, and he loves to volunteer. He got to meet Landis Sims about 2 summers ago, a kid that was born with no hands and no feet. This kid made his high school varsity baseball team as a freshman and batted .400 with no hands and no feet. Yes. Landis Sims. It's amazing what people can do with the supportive community. And so that's why Hire Heroes USA, I tell veterans my own story of struggle, because, I knew I could no longer have that fear we talked about, that fear of vulnerability. No, hell no. You got to face everything and rise. You got to go on this journey. You got to go through this hard stuff of getting denied, getting told no. Yeah, it's going to hit you, but how are you going to grow? How are you going to learn from it? I'm telling those stories. I'm sharing those my struggles with other veterans over a cup of coffee and telling them how I had those dark moments, how I wanted to give up, how I wanted to quit, how I wanted to go back. I tell them that, and it helps them kind of see that, hey, this is not going to be easy, but guess what? I'm going to do this. I know I'm not alone. Tony went through this. We're cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it. And so, that's what it's all about, helping others. It's reaching behind and saying, come on, I went through it, but guess what? You don't have to go through it alone.
Tony, I know you mentioned growth mindset, and that's a key pillar, I think, for what has been helpful for you and what you're encouraging others to have. For someone who doesn't know, it's more conceptual, but they want to put it into practice and they want to take the first step to having a growth mindset. John and I talk about doing something you suck at.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good call to action for anybody. Just do something and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because you never know what the outcome is going to be. But what practical advice do you have for someone who's going to embark on a journey with the growth mindset?
You have to understand that growth happens when you're uncomfortable. You have to face being uncomfortable. You have to face being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And realize that, the journey, I tell you, there's a book that I read once a year now. It's called The Alchemist.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about a journey. Life is a journey, and it's going to have challenges. But those challenges, I never met a great person that had an easy path.
Yeah.
Never met a great person that had an easy path. And so you have to realize that these challenges are going to help you become better. Not all obstacles should be avoided. You got to learn how to traverse them. And you're going to get stronger. You're going to get smarter. You're going to get better when you traverse those obstacles. And obstacles are going to show up in life. But one thing you can't do is quit. And you don't want to be bitter. You don't want to get through it. You want to grow through it. All right, I'm facing this. Okay. Do I have anybody in my community that's faced this before? Ooh, being vulnerable, asking for help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, this is hard. Oh, being uncomfortable. I mean, I learned how to backpack. I'm telling you, I've learned so many different things, and continuing to have that mental, spiritual, and physical fitness in your life. That's one thing. Coming out of the military, we have to understand we did that. Self-care was forced upon us because we had to have a level of readiness, right? We had to be ready at a moment's notice.
Yep.
So what happened with that? We were forced to go to the dentist. We were forced to get our flight physicals once a year. We were forced to do this. We was forced, to get our immunizations. That's all self-care. Oh, we had to do physical fitness every single day.
Yeah.
It's the first thing scheduled on the training schedule, and it's the last thing ever canceled. That's self-care. That's that physical fitness. Don't walk away from that. Maintain that. That keeps you strong. And then your spiritual fitness, you got to have your spiritual fitness.
That's so good. Tony, that's why I think your story is so powerful. And that's why I think, I can easily see why you're Client of the Year nominated by Higher Heroes, because of your past and the adversity that you overcame and you decided to walk away from and look into something bigger than yourself. And then your ability to convey the struggle outside of your service, 25 loyal years to the service, but then you walk out and as a lot of members do, broken and looking for assistance. Then you receive the assistance and then you forge your own path and now you're successful, but you're taking the time to look back and say, no. Those of you that grew up in rough childhoods, those of you that walked away from a situation and joined the service, those of you that are struggling to now turn a new leaf outside of the service, those of you that are dealing with difficulties in your everyday life, whether that's in sports or education or just direction, you're reaching back to all those individuals and you're saying, I've been through it too, and if I can make it, you can make it.
Yep.
And that's why your story needs to be told. And that's why your story needs to be heard. Man, I'm truly blessed to hear your story. And I know you're in Idaho, and we are now going to link up and have some fries together. But there's so much power to telling people about what you've been through and being vulnerable in the right place, in the right time, and saying, listen, if I can do it, so can you, and I'm here to help.
That's it.
Because it's one thing to tell somebody that you can make it, but you don't help them out.
Right.
But when you combine the two, man, it's symbiotic, and it's a boost. It's a shot in the arm to get somebody up and going. So thank you for that. Thank you for that decision to be a difference maker. Thank you for linking up with Higher Heroes and sharing your story with us. And then thank you for just the time you spent to break down some of those walls for us. So, man, what a great episode. And for people that want to reach out to you, Tony, how can they do that? And how can they do that the best way?
I am very active on LinkedIn, so look up Tony J. Liles on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I do a little social media, Tony.J.Liles on Instagram. I do some mental health awareness. I work with the organization called Headstrong Project, and I'm really trying to work in my community to decrease the stigma around mental health. So I share my own struggles with mental health and what I've learned along the way by getting help. I tell veterans all the time, there's a story where, the story, I don't know if y'all ever heard the story of the buffalo, but the buffalo is the only animal that will actually walk into a storm.
Yeah.
And where cattle, like cows and others, they run away from the storm. And when you're running from that storm, you're going to get injured. You don't know what direction you're headed. You're just running, trying to get away from that storm. You're going to lose members of the herd. You're going to get injured. And eventually the storm is going to catch up with you. When that storm catches up with you, man, you're out of gas because you've been running away from it the whole time.
Yeah.
Whereas the buffalo would actually head into that storm, and they will endure that storm together. And they know as they go through that storm, they're going to get through it and come out on the other side. And on that other side is a beautiful day. And that's one thing I tell veterans about mental health is you're going to get stronger by getting help. You might have to go through a couple of counselors. It may not jive, it may not gel, but you're going to find that counselor or that organization that can help you, whether it's the VA, whether it's, the Headstrong Project, whether it's someone out in the civilian community, a counselor or therapist. There's someone there that can help you. So do what you got to do to take care of you, because we're losing too many of our brothers and sisters to drug abuse, alcoholism, suicide, because they're not getting that help. And that's what I saw growing up. Those gentlemen that my Uncle Bo used to give odd jobs to was those gentlemen that did not get help. And there wasn't help available in rural North Carolina. They couldn't drive 45 minutes to the VA to get help.
Yeah.
But now we have the ability, I know Headstrong Project gets help to rural veterans within 13 days, less than 2 weeks. Whereas the VA is almost 30 days they're going to get you in. The VA is the world's largest healthcare system. It's hard. So we have other organizations that can help the VA with helping veterans until the veterans can get into the VA. You know what I mean? So, the help is there. And so, Instagram, LinkedIn, look me up, or just shoot me a email to tony.liles@gmail.com. I'll be happy to have dialogue with you about, life outside the military and after the military. So I want to thank you, Michael and John, for this opportunity. I want to send a huge shout out to the team at Higher Heroes USA for helping to connect and make this happen. And I appreciate what you all are doing, and thank you so much for your time.
Wow.
Tony, thank you for your commitment to a lifetime of service and coming on this show. Your story, I say this, I feel like every episode now, but this is one of my favorite stories that we've had on our show, and I really appreciate you sharing it, for the military community as well as folks who don't have any experience with military families or the military community. I think there's some really powerful lessons in what you shared today. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's huge.
It was an honor to be on here. It's an honor. Truly an honor. So
The honor's ours, sir. The honor's ours.
Yes.
And what a phenomenal episode. I agree with you, Michael. It's a good one.
Y'all made it easy, man. Y'all made this easy.
I can't wait to get this one out. And so
for sure,
Michael, I think that's going to be it for time, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for being a phenomenal co-host, and man, we appreciate all the fans, all the individuals out there listening to these episodes, and again for Hire Heroes for allowing us to hear these stories from some phenomenal individuals. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Thanks, Tony. See ya.
See ya. My pleasure.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.